When I opened the doors to the little shop I'd poured my soul, and every last dollar, into, the only empty seats in the room were reserved for my family. The people I thought would be proudest of me. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Tara Lynn, 29, from a small Texas town, and for years I dreamed about opening my own home decor boutique. I saved every extra dollar, spent countless nights planning and decorating, and finally, it was ready. The grand opening was small, just my closest friends and a few loyal customers, but I thought seeing my family there would make it perfect. They never showed. Not my parents, not my brother Chase, not his wife Mara. No call, no text, nothing. I forced a smile and welcomed everyone who came, laughing and pretending my heart wasn't sinking. I tried to ignore the empty chairs, but every time I glanced their way, it felt like a punch to the gut. I kept thinking maybe something came up, maybe they were caught in traffic, maybe something. But deep down I knew. I remembered all the times I had been there for them, helping Chase with bills he shouldn't have had to ask me to cover, paying for Mom's emergency dental work, spending nights with my sick dad. I realized I had spent my life giving, and somehow when it mattered to me they just weren't there. It wasn't just hurt. It was the quiet understanding that things had changed between us. I was no longer the little girl they could lean on for everything. I was finally doing something for me, and they couldn't even show up for that. I smiled through my sadness, talked to my friends about the pieces in the store, and pretended everything was normal. But inside my heart ached. By the end of the night, as the last guests left, I felt a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride that I had finally built my dream, sorrow that my family didn't see it. I knew then that life was showing me a hard truth. Sometimes, the people we love most don't always support us when we need them. Yet standing there, in the quiet of my shop, I also felt something else, a spark of independence, a feeling that I could finally do this on my own. A few days after the grand opening, my mom called. Her voice was calm, almost casual, like nothing had happened. She said they couldn't make it because they'd been so busy, helping Chase move into his new house. I wanted to scream, to tell her that my shop opening was a once-in-a-lifetime moment, but instead, I nodded along, swallowing the hurt. Later that night, sitting alone in the apartment above my shop, memories started flooding back. I remembered paying for Chase's college tuition when he didn't have enough. I remembered bailing him out when he got in over his head financially. I thought about the nights I stayed by my dad's side when he was sick, or the times I rearranged my own life to help my mom when she needed me. And then it hit me. This wasn't just a one-time thing. It had always been like this. I gave and they took. They expected support, help, and money whenever they needed it. But when it came to celebrating me, they disappeared. Every time I tried to rely on them, I ended up disappointed. I thought about all the times I rearranged my schedule, all the weekends I sacrificed, all the small favors I thought were just part of being a family. Now it felt different. Now it felt like I had been holding up one side of the bargain all along, and they had been taking for granted that I would always be there. It was exhausting to realize the pattern, to see it so clearly after years of trying to make everything work for everyone else. I didn't say anything to my mom that night. I just sat quietly, staring at the little lamp on my desk, feeling the ache of being overlooked by the people I trusted the most. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would still care, still love them, but I would stop letting their expectations overshadow my own life. I started to understand that my energy, my time, and my heart weren't theirs to take whenever it was convenient. Something had shifted inside me, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. This time, I would protect myself, even if they never realized what they had taken for granted. 2 weeks after my mom's excuse, my phone rang. It was Chase. I braced myself, hoping maybe he would finally apologize for missing my opening. But the first words out of his mouth weren't about me at all. He asked if I could lend him $20,000. I froze. I couldn't believe it. He explained that he and Mara were short on cash after buying their forever home, like it was completely normal for me to just cover the gap. I tried to explain gently that I had just opened my store, that every dollar I had was tied up in rent, inventory, and bills I was barely keeping up. I could hear the disbelief in his tone, but instead of understanding, he laughed. "It's family, right?" he said, as if that made it all okay. "We help each other out." And just like that, something inside me broke. All the memories of supporting him, of putting their needs first, flashed in my mind. Every time I had stepped in when he struggled financially, every time I had covered for him or rearranged my life to make things easier, it suddenly felt like it had all been taken for granted. I realized then that helping each other had never been mutual. I had been the only one giving. They didn't show up for me when it mattered, but the moment they needed something, I was expected to be there. My chest tightened, and I had to sit down for a second, just holding the phone. I told him firmly I couldn't help. I tried to keep my voice calm, but inside, I felt a mixture of anger and disbelief. How could he act like this was normal? How could he pretend our relationship was balanced when it had always been one-sided? Hanging up, I felt a cold clarity. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about boundaries, about finally seeing the truth. I realized that if things didn't change, I would always be the one carrying the weight while they took what they wanted. My heart ached, but at the same time, I felt a strange sense of resolve forming, like this moment was the beginning of standing up for myself in a way I never had before. A few days after the call, my parents asked me to come over so we could talk things through. I thought maybe they finally understood, that we could have a real conversation about how hurt I felt. But the second I walked through the door, I realized it wasn't about understanding at all. They started talking before I could say a word. My dad reminded me how hard Chase was working, how much pressure he and Mara were under. My mom added that since I was single and didn't have kids, surely I could spare some help. I listened, quiet, my hands gripping my bag so tight I thought I might leave marks. Then she said it. The word that made my chest tighten like a fist. Selfish. She actually told me I was selfish for not lending Chase money, for not putting his needs above my own. I could feel the walls closing in, the air thick with the weight of judgment and expectation. I wanted to argue, to scream, to explain everything I had done for them over the years. But I didn't. I stayed silent, letting the words wash over me, letting the hurt settle in my bones. Their words weren't meant to open a discussion. They were meant to make me feel small, to make me doubt myself. By the time I stood to leave, my hands were shaking, my heart racing. I walked out without looking back, but I felt a fire growing inside me. This was the moment I realized I couldn't let them diminish me any longer. I couldn't let their guilt trips and their constant expectations control how I saw myself or my worth. As I closed the door behind me, I made a vow. I would still care about my family, but I would never allow them to make me feel small again. I would stand firm, protect my own boundaries, and stop letting their needs overshadow my life. That day, I felt a mix of anger, sorrow, and determination, but above all, a clarity that I had never had before. From that moment on, nothing about me would be dictated by their judgment or their demand. That night, alone in my small apartment above the shop, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by stacks of old receipts, faded messages, and photos that tracked years of me being the reliable one. I sorted through them slowly, letting the memories sink in. Times I covered bills for Chase, helped my parents when they were strapped, rearranged my life to make things easier for everyone else. Every note and picture told the same story. I had been the one holding everything together while they moved through life, expecting me to fill the gaps. I felt the weight of it all pressing down, a mixture of exhaustion and anger I hadn't allowed myself to fully feel before. I realized I had been giving not out of true joy, but out of habit, out of a sense of duty they had taken for granted. My heart was tired, and my patience had run thin. For the first time, I thought clearly about what I wanted and what I deserved. I wasn't going to let anyone exploit my generosity again. No more loans, no more favors, no more guilt trips disguised as family requests. I could help, sure, but not at the expense of my own stability and dreams. I made a quiet, firm decision. I wouldn't give them a cent, no matter how convincing their pleas became. But I wouldn't announce it yet. I had learned over the years that confrontation without strategy often backfired. There was a better way, a way to protect myself while making sure they understood the boundaries I had never enforced before. Sitting there in the dim light, I felt a mix of relief and resolve. It was like finally breathing after holding my breath for too long. I realized that standing firm didn't make me heartless. It made me aware, cautious, and capable of protecting the life I had worked so hard to build. That night, I promised myself I would no longer be taken for granted, and for the first time, I felt the beginnings of real freedom in my own choices. I decided to play along. I called Chase and told him I wanted to think about the loan, that I needed to see the numbers and make sure everything was official. I asked him to bring over paperwork, income statements, anything that showed how he and Mara were managing their finances. He agreed immediately, his tone full of confidence, like he already had me convinced. When he arrived at the shop, he carried a stack of papers and a smug smile, explaining in detail about his investments and future plans. I nodded politely, asking the occasional question, but inside I was paying attention to every word, every slip of detail. As he talked, he casually mentioned the money he had borrowed from our parents years ago, money that he never paid back. It was almost like he didn't realize I was listening so closely. I quietly took notes on everything he said, recording every inconsistency, every exaggeration, every hint of entitlement. I started compiling the evidence he didn't even know he was giving me. It was meticulous work, but there was a strange satisfaction in it. I realized just how much I had underestimated the need to protect myself and my hard-earned resources. By the time he left, I had a clear picture of their finances, their assumptions, and the patterns that had let them take advantage of me for so long. I wasn't just saying no anymore. I was preparing to make a point they wouldn't ignore. I could see the truth laid bare in his own words, and I finally felt like I had the upper hand, like the scales were starting to tip in my favor. For the first time, I felt calm and in control. I wasn't being petty or cruel. I was being smart. And the knowledge that I now had everything documented, every detail he unwittingly shared, made me realize I could finally confront this situation with clarity and power, without fear or hesitation. I wasn't just defending my money, I was defending myself. A week later, Chase and Mara showed up at the shop again, expecting me to greet them like nothing had happened. I waited until they were in the middle of the main room, surrounded by customers browsing, before I finally let it out. I started calmly at first, recounting every time they had lied or manipulated me, every favor they had taken for granted, and every loan I had covered without complaint. I told them how their actions had made me feel small, invisible, and used. My voice shook only once, but my words were sharp and clear. I didn't hold back. Mara's face turned red as I detailed moments where she and Chase had exploited my trust. She looked around, realizing the customers were hearing everything, and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Chase tried to argue, to laugh it off, to charm his way out of the situation, but I didn't flinch. I looked directly at him, holding his gaze. "You skipped my opening because you couldn't stand to see me succeed," I said, and for the first time, the words hung in the air between us like a mirror he couldn't avoid. He tried to respond, to justify himself, but I could see it, the shift in his expression, the crack in his confidence. I didn't need anyone else to witness it, but the presence of my customers, my friends, and my employees made it real. I was no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be okay while my family walked over me. This confrontation wasn't about punishment, it was about reclaiming my power, showing that I wouldn't tolerate disrespect or manipulation any longer. By the time the room settled, the tension lingered, but I felt lighter. I had spoken my truth, exposed the pattern of their behavior, and refused to let it continue. It wasn't just about money or missed events anymore. It was about standing up for myself and showing that I would never be pushed aside again. That day, I finally drew a line, clear and unmovable, in front of everyone who mattered, including myself. After that day, everything changed. My parents called me furious, accusing me of airing dirty laundry and embarrassing the family. They made it clear they were standing with Chase. And just like that, the bond one thought I had with them began to unravel. Calls went unanswered, texts ignored, and slowly, contact with all of them faded until it disappeared entirely. The loneliness hit hard. There were nights when I sat in the quiet of my shop, wondering if I had overreacted, if I had been too harsh. The sting of losing my family's presence in my life was sharp and constant, like a weight I couldn't shake. I missed the idea of family, the support, the comfort, the familiarity, even if it had always been one-sided. But life didn't stop for grief. I focused on the shop, pouring my energy into every corner, every display, every handmade piece. Slowly, people began to notice. Word spread about the unique items, the care put into each decoration, and the warm, inviting space I had created. Friends and neighbors started stopping by more often, telling their friends, bringing their families. Within a few months, the shop became a favorite spot in town. It wasn't just a business. It was a place that reflected me, my taste, my effort, my soul. I began to feel proud in a way I hadn't before, realizing that success and recognition could come without their approval or presence. Even though my family never stepped foot inside, it no longer mattered. The support I needed existed elsewhere, in the community I had nurtured, in the relationships I had chosen, in the people who genuinely celebrated what I had built. The pain lingered, but it became quieter, replaced by a steady sense of accomplishment and independence. I was learning that family didn't have to be defined by blood, and that sometimes losing the people who take for granted your efforts can open the door to discovering the people who truly matter. Months later, I heard that Chase's business had collapsed. I wasn't surprised, but when he appeared at my shop, it was clear this time he wasn't confident or smug. He was desperate. His suit looked worn, his usual bravado gone, and there was a nervous edge to his voice I had never heard before. He asked if I could help him cover some debts, hinting that even our parents were struggling financially. For a moment, I studied him quietly, noticing the subtle panic in his eyes, the way he fidgeted with his hand. I didn't rush to speak. I simply offered him a glass of water and waited. When he finally looked at me, pleading in a way he never had, I felt a calm settle over me. I didn't need to lecture, didn't need to remind him of the past. I let the silence speak. Then, with soft but unshakable certainty, I said, "Family helps each other, remember? You taught me that." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, frozen. The words hung in the air, a mirror of everything he had once demanded from me, but never offered in return. His expression shifted from hope to shock, and I could see him grasping, finally, the weight of his own choices. There was no anger in me, no gloating, just clarity. I wasn't responsible for cleaning up the mess he had created, and I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again. That moment marked a quiet victory, the culmination of years of being taken for granted. The first time I could truly say I had reclaimed control over my life and my boundaries. As I walked back to arranging new items on the shelves, I felt an unexpected lightness. The lesson had come full circle. Support had to be mutual, respect had to be earned, and sometimes, letting someone face the consequences of their actions was the most powerful way to uphold both. He was speechless, and I was finally free. One evening, after a long day at the shop, I switched off the lights and looked around at the people who had gathered. My employees were there, chatting and laughing, their faces full of warmth. Friends I had made over the years brought snacks and stories, and a few regular customers lingered, offering smiles and encouragement. The space felt alive in a way I had never experienced with my blood relative. I realized then that family isn't always about shared names or DNA. It's about loyalty, about showing up when it matters, about supporting each other through both small victories and hard days. These were the people who had celebrated me, who had believed in my dreams without judgment, without expectation, without taking more than they gave. For the first time, I felt completely unburdened. I wasn't carrying anyone else's mistakes, anyone else's needs, or anyone else's drama. I didn't owe anyone anything, and I didn't have to apologize for putting myself first. The freedom was dizzying, but it felt right, like stepping into sunlight after being trapped in shadows for far too long. I walked among them, smiling genuinely, hearing their laughter and stories, and realized this was the life I had been working toward all along. These people mattered because they chose to matter, because they contributed to my world rather than draining it. My heart felt light, my mind clear, and my soul calm. Closing the door that night, I didn't feel empty or lonely. I felt whole. I understood that love and connection are built on respect and presence, not obligation or bloodline. My real family had shown up in their own ways, proving that the people who stay by your side, who lift you up, and who value you, that's the family that counts. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free, completely seen, and entirely myself. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end. Sometimes the people we expect to support us let us down, but that's how we discover our real strength. I found my chosen family, friends, employees, and a community that truly shows up. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. See you next time. Bye.